very good afternoon. Hi, Noreen. How are you?
Doing good.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you to Isa for this opportunity to lead the discussion in regards to the building a new age enterprise architecture office. So thank you for inviting me as well as a moderator for this ISA 10 edition Asia Pacific. My fellow EA practitioner and friends, before that, let me introduce our panelists. The first one on the Mr. Brendon Clark. He's with a vast experience in the data architecture for ASA Group's emerging technology of data, a part of the innovation of the group operations. Let's welcome Mr. Brendon Clark. Hi, Mr. Brendon.
Hi, Sean. Good to be here.
How are you?
Yeah, we're very good here in Singapore.
Great. So my second panelist, he's the Chief Executive Officer and for the Trusted Services subsidiary of the Temasek Management Services. He's responsible for the sales and delivery of the full spectrum of the services across both technology, human resources, finance, and even event in Singapore and beyond that. So let's welcome Mr. Weng Tat as well to the session. Hello,
Thanks.
How are you, Weng Tat?
Very good, very good. Just a note that I used to run Accenture's regional enterprise architecture practice for more than 6 years, but that's some time back.
All right.
Today, of course, I practice EA within my own shop when we, create our own digital transformation. So I'll share some of those thoughts with you later on. But I'm very glad to be here, seated in Singapore. But I'm sure everybody will also enjoy the sessions, even though it's virtual.
Perfect. Thank you so much for a slight introduction about yourself. And finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Saiful Azhar. He's the Head of Enterprise Architecture and Strategy from the Bank Simpanan Nasional, Malaysia. So he's with a vast 11 years experience, extensive experience across enterprise architecture, project management, technology strategy, blueprinting, development, etc. I would like to welcome Encik Saiful Azhar
welcome, Sean. Thanks for the brief introduction. So I'm looking forward to share my experience with all you guys and also the panelists here, Brendon and Teck.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Welcome. So specifically for our topic here, building a new age in the area of enterprise architecture office, that I think everyone knows that exploring the requirement, especially the enterprise architecture office, set up and identify the EA skill set competency for digitalization is one of the key components apart from having a knowledge on the enterprise architecture and having that strategy moving forward. And I believe all of us understand that this EA specifically is a discipline for proactively and holistically leading towards the enterprise response to the disruptive forces that we have having right now, right? Especially in pandemic situations, and by identifying and analyzing the execution of the change towards the desired business, especially business outcome and business vision as well. So and we know that EA is deliver value, by presenting business and IT leaders within our signature ready recommendations for adjusting policy and project that we try to envision or try to achieve our target towards a business outcome and capitalize of the relevant business disruptions. So maybe my first question to Mr. Brendon, can you please share with us on your experience especially in building business architecture office, and what are the should be to your especially organizations, and maybe your past experience to building the enterprise architecture office, especially in this new age. Over to you, Mr. Brendon.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It's been a very interesting day so far. I've managed to catch a lot of the previous sessions, and I think the subject here is specific to new age, if you like, enterprise architecture, how we deal with the digital age. But everything Paul said about starting with training and capabilities, having good defined roles for all architects. You know, we need to be a lot better at having infrastructure architects and data architects as practices and business architecture. And I think I heard a lot of people today speak about the fact that the technology may have moved on. We now work with less, I think Paul made this point, but somebody definitely spoke about less control than we used to in the past. We used to, as architects, try and lock down a design and say that this will be the target state. And, you know, potentially with global enterprise architecture teams, we have to implement in different locations, different local regulations, local skill sets, local technology, but we will always have guiding practices. Now we sort of trust a lot of Office 365, Salesforce. These environments, these have thousands of releases a day. They don't announce change. They don't control change the way we used to, like as engineers, as architects, in defining solid target states. So now I believe we have to operate a lot more with less control. So putting the boundaries around the business requirements, the outcomes and what we want, you know, we tend to, I believe, start to shape all of what technology will deliver more closely related to the business outcomes. So I think today I've learned that this is pervasive. Everybody is going through this. You know, in AXA, we've been on this journey for about 5 years. We've taken a serious digital transformation. Look, COVID has definitely, as all of us here for the last 18 months, almost 2 years, accelerated what we were all planning to do anyway. But we reached in insurance sales some very hard physical limitations. You know, due to regulation, due to life insurance in particular, life and health insurance, these are very emotive and emotional sales journeys. And we're regulated. We have to ensure that people are financially able to pay their premiums, that they have medical pre-existing conditions, and there's a lot of toing and froing. So we sell through distributors, right? I was in Thailand with AXA for 7 years. Sorry, I was in Thailand for 7 years. I was with AXA for 2 of those. But we had 27,000 agents. And so we began this journey about 5 years ago. We simply couldn't handle paper and the submission of fax and mailing in all of the sales applications. So we were driven to have digital sales tools. Now, I would say that we started that about 3 years ago. I would say that we're still in the middle of that transformation journey. You know, everybody wants to be like Google now. Everybody needs to be offering a service like an Amazon. So the customer has to be at the center of all of the transactions. So yeah, look, some of the key takeaways, I think governance and having these abilities to have good, strong technical knowledge within the organization that can talk to the business and guides. And several people talked today about guiding and almost coercing. Like, I think a good enterprise architect, you know, if I step back from this and think of the capability, I used to try in my team in Thailand to practice this all the time, and it was very hard to get people in Southeast Asia to say no, particularly to a superior, or in some cultures just to someone that's older than you. If the business person comes in and they're higher in the hierarchy, they say, we're going to do this. And enterprise architects need to have conviction and stand there and think of the long-term strategy and longer-term needs of the enterprise, not the tactical needs of the business. And I used to literally practice them to say no first. Now, it was always no, we can't, but we can come up with options and workarounds and alternatives. But if we always say yes to that immediate tactical, whoever yells first, whoever yells loudest, we don't progress along the strategic direction that we all need to and want to at the moment.
Perfect. So like maybe I move to my second panelist. Like yeah, having seen that by having governance that Brendon mentioned just now, maybe to wait that. So like one of the key importance, especially to acceptance and buy-in from the leaders in building enterprise architecture, especially in this new way, new way of working or the new age. So like maybe you can share with us a bit like on your perspective and what is the evaluations of your EA practice in building the skill sets competency and also the acceptance from the business stakeholder, Mr. Venkat.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sean. Allow me to be philosophical for a few minutes.
Sure.
If you look at humanity, right? I mean, humankind, we have been building buildings, right? The physical buildings for, I guess, if you take pyramids, 6,000 years plus minus, right?
Yeah.
And how many years have we been building application as humanity? 60. Okay, if you take Alan Turing's seminal paper as a starting point, right? I mean, computing and so on in the 50s, I guess 60. So 60 versus 6,000, right? If you look at the building code, right? Every country has a building code. They have architects, they have engineers, they have structural engineers, they have mechanical, electric, yada yada. They have bricklayers, they have contractors, and it's extremely complicated way. And today, if someone wants to build a building, you can sit down with an architect. Probably in a few hours planning, software, modeling, blah, blah, blah. You know how many bricks, how long it takes, how much it's going to cost, inflation adjusted even, and so on and so forth, right? If someone wants to build a software and they say, well, what do you want? Well, maybe something better than Facebook. How do you estimate, right? How do you go about architecting this? How do you say what is yes, what is no, and so on, right? So now, if you think about the architectural world, there used to be a saying that it takes somebody who is more than 50-year-old before the person can be a very good architect, right? But if you look around us, okay, we call ourselves architect, right? Database architecture or whatever you call it. It's a bit of an oxymoron in a sense because, architecture is supposed to be wide, know enough of everything, but tying it and putting it together in such a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing way. And that's what an architect do, right? Because an architect knows everything and then put together in this whole, right? An engineer is what is good at depth, creating deep end of, network, databases, whatever it is, right? So an database architect is an oxymoron, if you understand what I'm trying to say. Right? It shouldn't exist, right? Because it's not whole, it's just deep in. Okay, I mean, if you work on Oracle database and you're an architect there, okay, I understand, because your whole life is all about that, and that's your architectural work. Now, come back to your question. We have to understand a few things. One is the mega change that's happening in the 60 years of building applications. We are in this whiplash of change that is now hitting us, right? And so as an architect, we have an extremely difficult role because we are in the midst of this whiplash, right? Digital transformation is everywhere. Businesses are going bust or going boom because of COVID and whatever not. And so how do you, build competency of an enterprise architect in the midst of this storm, right? I mean, we're in the middle of the storm, right? So how do you do it? It's extremely difficult. I mean, and then humanity has only 60 years and there's really no degree you can go to. I mean, to say that I'm going to be a architect out of this, at the end of the architectural degree, right? Because you can, there's com science, but that's not really architecture, right? You can learn programming, but that's not architecture, right? So it's a difficult question because it's in the context of history, that question is extremely difficult. So now that I've set that context philosophically, I'll answer your question. Ultimately, it is a business thing. It's not an IT thing. It's driven from the top. If a CEO understands architecture, perfect, right? So I'm kind of in a good position because I started as an enterprise architecture and then now I'm in a CEO position. So I can tell my team, guys, business needs to change. You need to reorganize, because oftentimes it's not about the application. It's about, having the ability to see, reorganize your process or reorganize your organization even, right? And that's not always available to the enterprise architect as a means of change, right? But to the CEO, probably has a better, Now, competency, how do you answer the question of competency? Well, I think we also got to rethink competency. It's not just understanding of application, infrastructure, cybersecurity, data architecture and business processes and so on. It's not just that. I think as an enterprise architect, we need to learn how to communicate.
Yep.
More than that, we need to learn how to buy the hearts of our sponsors, our board members, our C-suite leaders, right? How do you get them to buy into this idea of long-term planning as to short-term turbulence planning, right? Reacting all the time. That's a competency that's beyond just technical. And I think as an enterprise architect, that's what it is. We are actually trying to design something that is beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and it takes the ability to communicate with passion, right? And today we're all communicating through this little thing called the webcam. In the past, you can communicate face to face, you can interact, and you can see body language and all that. But communication skills today has switched literally because of COVID. We now are actually needing to communicate with passion. How do I deliver passion through this tiny little webcam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just facts. I can give you facts on a PowerPoint and Excel, but can I communicate with passion? Not really.
Questionable.
So competency is shifting all the time. And I think first and foremost, our technical competency must be up to par, clearly,
Yep.
right? Our application, our infrastructure, our business processes, and our organization understand that clearly has to be up to par. And then on top of that, you need to be able to buy hearts of your bosses and sponsors. You need to be able to communicate to the masses that's going to implement this complicated thing called enterprise architecture. So to me, if you can do those, you are the perfect enterprise architect, which we know does not exist. So, so that's my philosophical answer to your question, Sean.
Perfect. You touched about the human dynamic skill. You touched about the quality attribute. That's one of the two important components on top of the the 5 identified in ISA, and definitely more than 80%. Yeah, in for enterprise architect work is about managing the human, right?
Yes.
So not just about IT design or IT environment. So like maybe I move to the third panelist, Saiful. Like
Right.
that's now like. Teck mentioned about the complex environment, complex business requirement, etc. Like, question to you, like, to design and build a good enterprise architecture team and practices that we need to understand our complex set of our driver, especially from our stakeholder, definitely from our businesses, as in your organizations. So maybe you can share to us, like, with us your journey, especially, and your thought on this perspective on managing the complex environment.
Right. Thanks, Sean. So basically, yeah, to reiterate back, right, to design and build a good architecture team and practice is not an easy task. Okay? So like what Teck mentioned on the management support and buy-in, so that is crucial. So to reflect to my journey, right? So first of all, to get this EA team or practices to be applied or to be suggested, right? So the management support and buy-in is crucial. So we need to have a clear direction and strategy, how we're going to position this EA team or setup, and how we're going to make this efficient and being applied. So looking at that, one of the key things that I think is important when we need to have this team and practices, we need to look at the practicality and the acceptance. So when I say the practicality, right, is looking at how efficient this EA team or practices can work and support the business and also the top management. And the acceptance level is something that how the people around the organization can accept this team and apply their framework or the policy that been set up by the EA, for example, like the EA guiding principles, standards. So these two things I think are quite important to have this EA team and practice being successful. And also, I would like to add on also on the cultures and also the enterprise mindset. So one of the things that I think quite crucial is to look at the organization culture and how can we embrace all this enterprise mindset, because the EA is not just lying on our EA team. So my practice that I would like to have that application team also must have this EA mindset, or infrastructure team also need to have my EA mindset. Business also need to have this EA mindset. That's why I call it as an enterprise mindset. So this is something that I have been set up and try to preach to make sure that each of everyone carries this value and the mindset.
Perfect, Saiful. So maybe
Yep.
the next question is open between Brendon and Teck. So like in the context of building, why do you think building enterprise architecture is important in our organizations, and why it is important to align with our digital journey? Maybe we start with
I'll take it first, maybe.
yeah,
Brendon,
please.
if you allow me to take it first, and then you can kind of build on that. I feel that in planning cycle, planning used to be a batch process, right? We used to, country has a 5-year planning, company used to have a 3-year planning. I think those all go out the window with digital, right? Because if you think about planning now, planning is a continuous cycle of planning. Because things change, you tweak your plan. COVID hit, you change your plan. You go online more because of COVID, you change your plan. And then suddenly your cybersecurity is not up to par because of your Zoom wasn't really protected well. You have to change your plan. Constantly, you're changing your plan. The company that are successful has an agile planning process. It's not just agile delivery of your application, it's an agile strategy, right? So, and who is in the midst of this preparing the continuous planning? It's enterprise architecture office, clearly, right? Because the implication between organization change, when you pop up a new business unit, right? And all the application processes and infrastructure and information that's required alongside are all planned by a group of people. If it's not centralized, it's decentralized, you probably have a mess of some sort anyway. So once you consolidate the planning, you're tracking the market because the business wants to change and you're tracking that change all the time, right? And this change and all the little tweaks that happen, there's a few things. If you do too much detail, you're bogged down like a centipede, looking at your feet, you can't move at all. But if you are going to look at sufficient detail, then you can deduplicate work, save effort. You can look at, sharing, again, go to market faster, and all the other benefits we know EA can bring, right? So I think that's my view, as in like with all these changes and stuff like that, you really want to track the market as best you can. And the planning function that does that in the past used to be corporate planning with all the batch processes, yearly basis, whatever, go offsite and play golf, whatever, and then you come back with some plan. Well, that goes out the window, right? Enterprise architecture is about this capability of tracking the market. That's what it is, actually, at the end of the day.
Perfect. Maybe some thought on you from you, Brendon?
Yes, look, I think it was a great perspective from WeTech. We still do annual planning. It's interesting. So we're in the middle of strategic planning, which is an annual exercise. But AXA is very unique. So I've worked in many large enterprises, traditionally banking most of the time, and we run a very federated model. And so it's important when you're spread out, but you loosely operate in a matrix back to Paris. Once a year, everybody has to report to the management committee, and we have these things called CEO dialogues. That happens next month. So all of last month was the regular annual strategic planning. But look, I don't fault WeTech's thinking on this. What happens in between now is no longer an in-country annual strategic plan. It's literally monthly sales results. What are the distributors doing? What are they struggling to do? What do our customers want? What are our competitors doing? And we have to spin very quickly. So that organizational change, absolutely, it sits within the strategic view of enterprise architecture. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, really, but one thing that a lot of people get wrong with enterprise architecture, and I've spoken at length with Aaron on this one, and we share the view, obviously. Enterprise architecture, and WeTech mentioned this, he mentioned it being the CEO and the enterprise architect, you have to operate within the right structure. So you can have your competency, but you must be structured right to affect business change. And in doing that, one thing that I always seek is authority. And I often see enterprise architecture teams sit under a CTO or a CIO down in the org chart, following the business decision making. And look, everyone's shaking their head. When that happens, and we still have that structure today in AXA, I'll be honest. When that happens, you end up being glorified solution architects. And the business comes to you with propositions and have already chosen the provider. They've already signed the contract. It's too late. So you know, just structure and authority are those two things that I look for which is really about business architecture again.
Sean,
yeah, sure.
Again, I just want to make a correction to myself. I don't advocate a certain structure. I think all structure must be under a certain political structure or a certain organization structure. So like Brendon's case, there must be some reason for that, right or wrong in that case. I think EA needs to be designed for efficiency and effectiveness. And that means different structure in different organization, just to make sure that I advocate certain structure.
No, look, Teck, that's exactly what I meant. Having the authority as an enterprise architect to have the voice and to convince the business that we're talking the same. Yeah,
I think we're talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Perfect. So maybe to first, before I move to both of you, like maybe to Saiful first, like in looking at the several factors such as we talk about digital transformation, we talk about risk in our landscape, you know, the complex landscape that we have. We talk about to increase our competitions to our, we have our competitor, and we look into the needs of to modernize our technical foundations that we have currently in our organization. And the demand of talent is very important nowadays. Without looking at that perspective, definitely we lost our good talent or our definitely a good talents in our organization. Maybe you can share with us of your experience, especially to sustain a good and motivation EA talents in your organization, especially in BSN.
Yep, thanks, Sean. I think this is very good question and something that is crucial for the EA journey and modernization. So when we talk about how can we sustain or support a good motivational EA talent in an organization, right? First, I think like what Brendon and also Teck mentioned we need to give them empowerment, meaning the authority to make decisions. So that is very crucial because some certain EA in an organization, right, they just able to flag or just to highlight what are the technology gaps or technical requirements, so on, to meet the business. But when it comes to the decision, it go back to the business head or business stakeholder, so on. But that kind of empowerment is not there. So that's why it go back to the structure of the EA. So what will be the best position to structure this EA? So some certain organization, EA will be outside of the IT or they will report direct to the CEO or board. And some organization, the EA is under the IT domain. So that is where the EA is just looking at IT, and we need to be helping the business to reach what business want. So that is the value that I could see there is pros and cons with both setup. But for my organization, we are sitting in the IT. So what we are doing that we look at how can EA enable the business to support the business strategy and the digital demands. So when we talk about the talents to retain, I think again the support and buy-in from the management, and also we need to empower this EA with the continuous trust and give them the authority to highlight and to be part of the example like a senior management board meeting to flag. EA need to be more visible from the organization point of view. So if that has been cascaded, so that will be a clear picture, or the message from the EA to the rest of the stakeholders will be clear and can be adapted